Hey, everybody, and welcome to Breaking Biotech, the podcast where we break down individual biotech companies and see if we can find any opportunities to make some money. My name is Matt, and you've tuned in to the second episode. The first one I feel like I got a lot of good feedback on, and some people agreed, some people disagreed, but I'm trying to show my honest take on the situation and and seeing what's up. So what I want to talk about today is Madrigal Pharmaceuticals, and I had done two blog posts about NASH, and my first one was on Intercept Pharma, and I talked about why I did not think that their product was a good investment opportunity, and then I followed it up with Madrigal, and sadly I was too late on that giant pump that happened after they announced their phase 2 preliminary data. So after that, I took a deeper dive into the company and saw that there was some real potential there. So I wanted to talk a little bit today about it because they had some phase 2 data that came out for their HeFH clinical trial, and that's heterozygous familial hypercholesterolemia. So I'm going to call it HeFH for obvious reasons. And so I think there's a lot of potential, and this company is a definite buy or a hold right here. I think long term they're going to be a big player in this space, and I don't see too many hurdles other than their good data that's going to be expected in their phase 3 trials. So they've only brought this drug to 2 phase 2 trials, and they're wrapping them up right now. So based on how they roll out the phase 3 trials, I think that's going to be the next thing that we have to watch for. So let's get into it. I have the daily chart up here for the stock, and so around December at some point they announced their data for their NASH trial, their phase 2 NASH study, and they had an MRI technique that was able to estimate the amount of liver fat in patients. And they saw that their compound MGL 3196 was able to significantly lower the amount of liver fat and fibrosis in NASH patients. So this news led to a gigantic increase in the stock, and I don't blame them for that because the data was very good. There was a lot of hype based on that, and a lot of hype based on the HeFH trial, which we're going to get into. And so I think the stock went into overbought territory after, just based on all the hype, and then the results for the HeFH trial came out, and we've sort of been just going back and forth around $130 a share. So the compound itself, MGL 3196, it's a beta thyroid hormone receptor antagonist. So it's basically a transcription factor that's able to activate a bunch of stuff. And in the liver, when this happens, it has all these improvements in NASH. But for the specifics that I'm going to talk about with HeFH, it's a little bit different. And I don't know if they have a precise mechanism of action when it comes to serum cholesterol and triglycerides. But I think for NASH, they see a direct effect on the liver. And so the NASH thing itself is a really big opportunity for them. The market for NASH is obviously way bigger than for HeFH. And check out my blog post. I'm going to put a link below. But look at my previous blog posts on NASH and the opportunity there. So that's really the big opportunity I see in this company is the NASH market. But they're also looking at getting other indications of this drug for hypercholesterolemia. So there's 2 kinds of hypercholesterolemia, familial hypercholesterolemia. There's homozygous and heterozygous. So you've got 2 copies of a gene. Everybody has 2 copies of every gene for the most part. And in this disease, if you knock out one of the genes, you get a certain amount of increased cholesterol in the blood. And if you knock out both, you get a lot more cholesterol in the blood. So it's a bigger problem if you're homozygous for this disease. But heterozygous hypercholesterolemia is still increases your risk for cardiovascular events, negative ones that can lead to death, and those are things like stroke or cardiac arrest. So these patients need to have very good monitoring of their cholesterol, and they have to be on lifelong statins or lifelong PCSK9 inhibitors, anything that can lower their cholesterol so they don't get plaque buildup in the arteries, and which can lead to increased chance of cardiac events or stroke. So Madrigal noticed that in their NASH trial and in other trials that they always got lower serum lipids and cholesterol. So they wanted to see whether or not in a group of HeFH patients, whether or not that would have a positive effect. So in their phase 2 study, they had 116 patients randomized 2-to-1 for the compound or placebo. So 2/3 of the patients were on MGL 3196 and 1/3 were on placebo for 12 weeks. And this was in addition to their current cholesterol lowering regimen. So if you've been living under a rock for the last 10 years, statins have been a gigantic boom in this industry, anything that has to lower cholesterol, because they're very effective cholesterol lowering drugs. So Madrigal is trying to figure out how they can position themselves as an additive to current standard of care, which is statins and other types of drugs like that, or whether or not it should be a standalone. So this trial is less important than the NASH stuff because there's already very effective drugs for lowering cholesterol on the market. But this trial was to see whether or not the MGL 3196, in addition to current standard of care cholesterol lowering therapy, would be more effective than just the monotherapy. Well, it's not really a monotherapy, but I'll get into that. So in this phase 2 trial, 75% of patients were on high intensity statins, and 2/3 of them were on ezetimibe. Anyway, the second one is a compound that prevents cholesterol uptake in the gut, and statins are HMG-CoA reductase inhibitors. So the combination of these two has been a standard of care because they effectively can reduce serum cholesterol by almost about 50%, I think. And check the studies I cited in my Madrigal blog post, because these drugs together work very well to lower cholesterol. And basically this trial was to see whether or not adding Madrigal's drug would lower that even further. And the reason for this is that a lot of these HeFH patients, they're still not able to get in that target range of cholesterol, LDL-C, and ideally they want to get to below 70. What is it? I forget the unit for that. Okay, it doesn't matter, but I think it's milligram per deciliter, probably nanogram per deciliter. Anyway, it's not super important because the form that they send out, the press release that they send out, they talk in percentages anyway from placebo controlled, so it's not super important. Anyway, so the data they found for this, and I'm taking this from the conference call as well as the press release. So the conference call was kind of painful to listen to, just sort of boring, and they were sort of disjointed in the way that they could talk about this. So most of the information is on this press release, which is available at their website, the Madrigal Pharma website. So the most important thing is that LDL-C, which is a specific low-density lipoprotein, was lowered by 20% in patients treated with MGL 3196, and that is placebo-adjusted. So on the conference call, they said that the placebo group, which is the group that was just on their normal cholesterol-lowering drugs, that group actually increased about 9 to 10% over the course of the study, and the group treated with MGL 3196, I might not have said that right. So LDL-C was increased under the placebo group, but it was decreased under the MGL 3196 group. So the difference there is 18%, but when you look at the baseline adjustment, the lowering effect of MGL 3196 is probably only like 10 to 11% because the placebo group actually increased 10%. So that's something to note, and It'd be nice to actually see the raw data, but for some reason they often don't tell us this because they want to keep the data for publication. So they also mentioned that in optimal dose MGL3196 patients, 21% lowering effect was observed. So they were able to titrate a dose that was ideal for certain patients, and when this occurred, they got a bit of a boost in lowering effect. The other interesting things I noticed is that they talked about a statin-resistant group. So some people were not very good responders to statins, not that they were bad responders to statins, but they did not tolerate statins at high doses. So with any drug, you get a therapeutic range of effect, and if you go too high in that therapeutic range, you can get a lot of side effects that patients don't like. So if patients are relatively sensitive to those effects, the drug won't be administered higher than they can tolerate. So in this group of patients that couldn't tolerate statins very well, almost 30% of them, not 30% of them, but of that group, they showed almost 30% decrease in LDL-C. So on low-dose statins, they're able to get a substantially increased lowering effect of MGL3196. And conversely, groups that were already on very high doses of statins, they saw less of a effect of MGL3196. So when it comes to this kind of thing, you kind of max out an effect, and when you're already treated on statins and this ezetimibe that prevents uptake of cholesterol, you're hitting the physiological system in a way where you're only going to get a certain amount of maximal effect when it comes to this. I think the group was expecting more of an effect on high-dose statin people, but they didn't really see that, and I'm a little surprised too, because I would have expected, given that the mechanisms of action are different, that you would have seen more of an effect from the drug. But it looks like when it comes to this kind of thing, you get a maximum effect, and you can't really, it's harder to really get like 100% decrease in cholesterol. So this I don't think is necessarily bad. I think the overall takeaway is that MGL3196, in addition to other cholesterol lowering regimens, is able to do, slightly better. I think practitioners have a lot of options right now when it comes to cholesterol lowering drugs, so I don't think that this is going to be some sort of revolutionary thing in the HeFH world or in cholesterol lowering at all. But I think that positioned as well as the NASH effects, this is going to be just another indication that the doctor might see as, you have high cholesterol, you can take this drug, and it'll also help with your NASH. So I haven't looked too much in the data on whether or not statins have an improvement in NASH, but I would think if anything else, the statins probably improve things like NAFLD, which is the stage before NASH. And I think statins and other cholesterol-lowering drugs probably help with that, but if they don't help with the fibrosis effects in NASH, which are very specific, then MGL3196 is going to have a very good group of people, or very good application is what I mean. And doctors are going to look for that and probably be very excited to use this drug when it comes to patients that present with NASH as well as high cholesterol in the blood. But when it comes to HeFH, I think it'll be an option. It might not be the first thing that doctors go to select when they're treating this, but if it can be another indication for the drug, I think it'll be obviously very good for the company. So other things that I noticed from the press release are so they want to position this as being an additive drug. So a lot of times the guys that were on the conference call, I think they're hoping that when doctors exhaust all of the options, so you're on statins, you're on maybe PCSK9 inhibitors, you're on something else, that that's when practitioners are going to come in and say, oh, you know what, we have this drug, it might add another 15% lowering of your cholesterol, and let's try it out. And just given the fact that the safety profile of this drug so far looks very good, there were very minimal adverse events, and none of them were specifically related to the effects of MGL-3196. So I think that in particular might make it seem like a very attractive drug, that if the statins and everything else don't work, they can add this to it, and it might help. So I think that will be where this kind of fits in. So the biggest opportunity I see is obviously in NASH, and the catalysts that I'm going to be waiting for are the biopsy results in May, which are coming out, and they announced that on the conference call. So the technique that they used in December was different than a biopsy. A liver biopsy is the actual standard of or state of the art to actually see whether or not fibrosis in NASH is improving. So they're going to look to do that in the next couple months and release the results in May, and that should correlate. It should be the exact same as the special technique that they used in December, but you never know. I'm not expecting anything surprising then. They also talked about how they're going to present this data in an abstract at some conference soon, so we're probably going to get more details of how all of this stuff breaks down with the placebo and the treatment group and how far apart they actually are from baseline. The other thing we need to keep in mind is phase 3s need to happen for both of these patient groups. So they didn't get into too much detail about that, but the NASH phase 3 is going to be a gigantic trial. They're going to look to have about 1,000 patients, they said. And yeah, so we'll see what happens. That's going to take a long time, so I'm definitely keeping this as a long-term hold personally. But I think the upside is huge, and compared to the other drugs that I've seen regarding NASH, I think this one has the most potential. So I'm probably not going to get into too much detail on the other NASH drugs that are on the market. There's a lot of good ones that are good in other ways that also help with NASH. But this one here I think has the most potential to be a success. And yeah, I'll refer you to the previous blog post again if you want to get more details on that. So I've opened a position. I'm going to post it in the blog. But yeah, that's going to do it for me today. Please give me a like, a subscribe, or a comment. Let me know what you think if I'm off base on Madrigal, or what you think is I'm missing. If I'm missing anything, please let me know. I'm trying to learn as I go in this space too. But yeah, give me a subscribe if you like what I'm doing. And thanks a lot for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.